Thank you for the introduction, Catherine. Again, I'm Vui Nguyen, and I'm here to talk to you all about true or false. Enums manage state better than Booleans. Right now, can everyone hear me okay? Um, I can't really see the chat right now, so you have to tell me, Catherine, if there's a problem. I'm going to give a quick introduction,
Okay.
and yes, everything's good?
Yes,
All
we
good.
can hear you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go over a common situation, which is downloading and displaying data, and talk about the problem we might encounter, which is how do we check that the data that we downloaded was correct so that it can be displayed. And I'm going to discuss a couple of solutions using Boolean flags or enums or states, give a demo, and do a code walkthrough and some takeaways. And this is a member highlight that was posted on Twitter and Instagram. Um, I want to give a shout out to Sierra O'Brien from the Women Who Code mobile track community for putting this member highlight together for me. That's Barry. He not only is my dog, but he also likes to attend conferences with me, including this one. So a common operation that we perform in software is downloading data and displaying it. But what are the paths your software could follow? What could potentially go wrong? And again, how do we know that the data was downloaded correctly so it can be displayed? One way we can check is to use Boolean flags. But there's problems with using Boolean flags. So if you want to go ahead and type in the chat, just think about if you were building this software, what are all the possible things you want to check to make sure that what you downloaded was correct before you displayed it. So go ahead and give you a few seconds to do that. Now, states represent transitions in your program, and they can have multiple checks built into each state. So now that you know like states is a thing, think instead, what states would you use to represent those same program transitions instead of flags? So I'll go ahead and give you a few seconds if you want to type in the chat about what flags and what sort of states you would implement in your program. All right, so now that you've had time to think about that, I'm going to give you a demo showing you how to download data using Booleans in the code and using states. And here's the source code for my project. I will share the link to that at the end of my presentation as well. Okay, can everyone see my simulator? Still good? Okay. So what this program does is we're going to download some data and display it. What these toggles represent are environment variables that are out of control of our program. So we may be connected to the internet or not. The server may be down or the server may return bad data. Also, this toggle here will enable us to call the code to um, download the data using states or using flags. So we'll start by using flags. And it's look at all the flags that we have to check every single time we download data. Uh, and then let's check to see, let's say the server's down, okay? We'll start over. Again, we're checking all these flags every single time. And what happens if we're not connected to the internet? Again, checking all these flags, internet is offline. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. Let's do the happy path, but showing states. Now we're in the initial state, and then when we click the download, we're going to go to loading and then success. And same thing if we're not connected to the internet, what happens? Go from initial to loading to offline. What happens if server's not responding? We go from loading to error. So what I hope to show you, and I haven't shown you the code yet, but we'll get to that, is how clean it is to transition from state to state versus checking all those Boolean flags every time we want to do something. Any quick questions on this demo before I continue? I assume silence means we're good. Uh,
There's no questions, so it's okay.
okay, thank you. All right, so then this is what I was showing you earlier in the demo app. These are all the flags we have to check every single time we want to download data. Now, when we're downloading data using states, we are using this enum called data loading state, which I'll show you in the code, and all the possible values of that enum are these different states. Now, it doesn't seem like there are that fewer states compared to the flags, but as your program grows and as you need more states, actually the flags you will use will grow exponentially compared to the states. And I'll show you that. You'll see that in the code. But a really great way to understand states is with a state transition diagram, because then you can see very cleanly what happens when you move from one state to another. So again, we start with the initial state, and then when we're downloading, we go into loading. And from loading, we can go into offline, error, or success. And from any of these, we can go back to loading or go back to initial. So I hope you can see that this is very clean. You can see what's going on in your program. And if you were to try to diagram something using many flags, that it would not look this clean. So I'm going to go actually go through the code, which I know I've been teasing this whole time. So here we go. Um, So here I showed you this is the data loading state enum with the different possible values representing our states. And when we are downloading data, we are either calling, let's see, the make network call using Booleans, if we are using flags, or just this make network call function. Now you think, oh, this doesn't look too bad because only difference is here we're printing out the flags and here we're transitioning to the loading state. So this doesn't look too bad, but you'll start to see things really diverge when we look at the network call and also what happens when we return from the network call. So let's look at the network call then. And I'm going to add another screen there so you can compare and contrast. All right, so let's see, we're going to call, let's see, get the thing the hard way, excuse me, over here. I want to show you the good way on this side and then the hard way on this side. So you can kind of see very easily compare and contrast. By the way, is the font okay? Can everyone see the code all right? Real quick.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, thank you. So let's start with the Booleans, okay? So we are checking the environment variables here. If we're connected to the internet or if our internet call was successful, etc. But the thing I want you to notice is this completion handler. This is the function that's going to get called when we return from our network call. We are going to pass into it our data and our error object, even if it's nil. Okay, here it's nil. The data here, the data is valid. Here, the error is nil. That doesn't matter. Doing it this way, you have to check for both. Okay, so already you can. This is setting up for multiple checks. Now, if you're downloading data using enums or states, again, you're doing the same checks for the environment. But what you're doing instead is you're passing into the completion handler an enum with a value of failure, and then passing in the error object, or you're passing in the enum value of success and passing in the valid data. So already you can see when we come back from this network call that we're only checking for one thing. We're checking for error, what type of error, or data and what type of data. We don't have to check for both. We've already cut in half the number of paths our program will have to follow just by using enums. So then when we return back from that network call, again, I'm going to do the, oops, I did not, let's go to the right, uh, the correct class here. Okay, so then when we return from that network call, the hard way is handle result using Booleans. And then on this side, we just call it handle result. Okay, so here is where you really start to see problems with lots of Boolean flags. You first check to see, do we have an error? And if we do have an error, we have to check what type of error it is, depending on if you're connected to the internet or if you have a server error. But even if you don't have an error, let's say you don't have an error, you still have to then check to see if you have valid data. But you're not done, because then you still have to check if your name attribute inside your data object is valid. So you can see you just keep going on and on, like the checks just keep going. This is and you can imagine if the program is much bigger, how much more complicated that this could be, and how much more error prone things can get as the number of checks you include. Now let's go over here with handling the result using states. So remember, we got, in this case, an enum value of success coming back from the network call. And then we're then setting our data loading state enum value to success. These are two different enums, so don't be confused by that. So once we transition to the data loading state to success, we can uh, display the thing we downloaded. But if we got an error, then we check to see what type of error it is, and then we transition to the state of either offline or error. So you can kind of see right away you either go in this path or this path, and the path is much cleaner and you don't have to do as many checks. So I hope like this side by side comparison can already see the benefit. So that's a code walkthrough I went over. And that's because when you're in a state, you need to check for fewer things. A single state can contain information across multiple Booleans. So that means the larger your program gets and the more states it needs, the number of Booleans will actually increase exponentially. And that's because being in a state eliminates the need to check for conditions only applicable in other states. Let me show you another benefit of using states if we go back to the code. Okay, so let's close this. So this is my class that that implements the UI. Now, if we want to look at just here, um, the class that displays the states as it changes, right? You will notice this text box has this state variable. So that this view is bound to that state variable. What does that mean? So if we go back to uh, over here, the state variable is being published every time uh, its value changes. The app publishes that updated value so that any views that are listening to those changes can update itself. So that's why you see that state label changing automatically. And the really cool thing is there's no code where it's saying, okay, the state has changed. Now send a message to the update telling the update to update its label. That doesn't happen. It all happens automatically because of variable binding. So that brings me to over here. Another benefit of states is when we publish the app state, that notifies the app when the state changes automatically. So again, the UI and the data don't have to communicate back and forth. This is actually a huge bonus of declarative programming, which is what Swift UI is built on. Because all you have to do is just bind the state variable to the views, and the views update automatically when the state changes. And when you think about it, if you try to do the same thing with lots of Boolean flags, it gets really messy. It's just not practical to do this, publishing Boolean flags. But this is another benefit of using states. So I hope you get the final takeaway is that using states or enums reduces the need for multiple Boolean flags, which makes your code more concise and less error prone. Because when you have a lot of Boolean flags and your code gets larger and it's harder to maintain, and figure out what's happening, you may end up in a bad state, which can cause bugs, and the worst case scenario can cause crashes. And again, there's the link to my project. And even if you don't program in iOS, I hope you can still make use of my project by looking at the code and then extrapolate the concepts, and then you can apply same concepts to a programming language that you use, because enums and states is actually a topic that is applicable to many programming languages. So any questions? I'm going to stop screen sharing here. Okay, I can see the chat now, so I'm going to see if there's any questions. Okay.
Thank you, Vui, for that chat. They're both very interesting talks, and I'm sure everyone enjoyed them. If anyone has any questions, ask away. Maybe not, maybe that's it. Otherwise, what else is on now, if anyone's interested in having a look at this. These are some talks that are coming up now. Feel free to join and take a look at everything else.